The air in the North Haven General Hospital emergency room was a thick soup of human misery. It smelled of antiseptic, stale coffee, and the metallic tang of blood. Machines beeped in a frantic, disjointed symphony, each one marking the fragile rhythm of a life hanging in the balance. For Nurse Alara Vance, this chaos was a wall of sound she tried to hide behind. She moved through the ER with a quiet, almost apologetic shuffle, her shoulders hunched as if trying to make herself smaller. Her worn blue scrubs seemed a size too big, swallowing her slender frame. Her brown hair was pulled back in a severe, functional bun that did nothing to soften the permanent look of anxiety in her wide, doe-like eyes. Her colleagues had a name for her: Bambi. She looked like a baby deer, perpetually startled by the headlights of an oncoming trauma. She was slow. She was clumsy. She often got the simple tasks wrong, fetching the wrong gauge needle or misplacing a chart. Most of the senior staff had given up on her, relegating her to stocking supply closets, changing linens, and cleaning up messes others were too important to handle. Alara never complained. She just nodded, whispered, "Yes, doctor," or "Right away, nurse," and shuffled off to her menial task, her face a mask of placid obedience. Today was no different. She was restocking the suture kits in Trauma Bay 3 when a metal tray clattered to the floor behind her. She jumped, a gasp escaping her lips. Suture packets and sterile wipes scattered across the linoleum like fallen leaves. Laughter echoed from the nurse's station. "Way to go, Bambi," a senior nurse, Brenda, called out, not even looking up from her magazine. Alara's face flushed with a familiar, hot shame. She knelt, her hands trembling as she gathered the supplies. Her fingers fumbled, dropping a packet she had just picked up. The simple act of picking things up felt impossibly complex under the weight of their judgment. A shadow fell over her. She looked up into the cold, imperious eyes of Dr. Sterling. Dr. Alistair Sterling was the chief of emergency medicine. He was a man carved from arrogance and ambition. Tall, with silver-streaked hair styled with expensive gel, and a jaw that seemed permanently clenched in disapproval, he moved through his ER like a king surveying his domain. His white coat was pristine, his Italian leather shoes gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, and the Rolex on his wrist was worth more than Alara's car. He was a brilliant surgeon, a fact he never let anyone forget. He was also a cruel man who seemed to derive a perverse pleasure from the power he wielded over others. He looked down at Alara, a sneer twisting his handsome features. "Vance, what is the meaning of this?" His voice was not loud, but it cut through the din of the ER, sharp and cold.
"I'm sorry, Dr. Sterling,"
Alara mumbled, her gaze fixed on the floor. It slipped. It slipped, he repeated, the words dripping with contempt. "Everything seems to slip with you, doesn't it? Trays, charts, responsibilities." He nudged a suture packet with the toe of his gleaming shoe. "Do you have any idea how much these cost? Or are numbers with more than 2 digits too challenging for you?" The nurses at the station snickered. Chloe, a younger nurse who had always been kind to Alara, quickly looked down at her computer screen, her expression pained. She wanted to help, but nobody stood up to Dr. Sterling, not if they valued their job. "I'm sorry, sir," Alara whispered again, her voice barely audible. Sterling leaned down, invading her personal space. She could smell his cologne, a sharp citrus scent that felt suffocating. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you, nurse." Slowly, reluctantly, Alara lifted her head. Her eyes met his, and for a fleeting second, the fear was replaced by something else. A flicker of cold, hard defiance deep within their brown depths. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the familiar hunted look. But Sterling saw it, and it enraged him. It was the look of someone who refused to be completely broken. "You are a liability, Vance," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "You are incompetent, you are clumsy, and you are wasting my hospital's resources. I have half a mind to fire you right now." He straightened up, gesturing dismissively at the mess. "Clean this up, then go empty the biohazard bins. Perhaps that's a task even you can manage without causing a catastrophe." He turned on his heel and strode away, his white coat billowing behind him like a cape. The ER returned to its normal rhythm, but the echo of his cruelty hung in the air. Alara remained on her knees for a moment longer, her head bowed. The faded, paper-thin scar near her right temple, usually hidden by her hair, seemed to throb with a phantom ache. It was a relic from another life. A life where she was anything but incompetent. Anything but a victim. A life she had run from, hoping to bury it under the crushing mundanity of a quiet civilian existence. She took a slow, steadying breath, pushed the memories down, and began, once again, to clean up the mess. An hour later, the paramedics burst through the automatic doors. "We've got a bad one. John Doe from that multi-car pileup on the interstate." The patient on the gurney was a wreck. He was covered in mud, grease, and a shocking amount of blood. His clothes were shredded, his face a swollen mask of cuts and bruises. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow and ragged. The ER team snapped into action, a whirlwind of efficient, practiced motion. They swarmed the gurney, cutting away what was left of his clothes, shouting out vitals, and establishing IV lines. Dr. Sterling emerged from his office, looking annoyed at the interruption. He glanced at the patient with a practiced, dismissive air. "What do we have?" "John Doe, approximately 30 years old. Multiple fractures, suspected collapsed lung, severe blunt force trauma to the head and torso," a resident rattled off. "BP is 80/50 and dropping." Sterling did a cursory examination, his touch rough and impersonal. He shone a light in the man's eyes, checked his pulse, and pressed on his abdomen. "Typical pile-up victim. Internal bleeding for sure. Get him typed and crossed, chest tube, and prep him for an exploratory laparotomy. Put him in Bay 4. I'll get to him after I've seen Mr. Davenport in Bay 1. Mr. Davenport was a wealthy real estate tycoon and a major hospital donor who had come in with chest pains. Sterling saw a new wing with his name on it. This John Doe, this anonymous piece of road debris, was an inconvenience. A messy, unprofitable chore. "But doctor," the resident started, "his pressure is tanking. I don't think he can wait." "He's a nobody, Henderson," Sterling snapped, his eyes cold. "He'll wait his turn. Mr. Davenport is our priority. Now do as I say." He turned and walked toward Bay 1, already focused on the more prestigious patient. The team, following orders, moved the John Doe to the designated bay. They were professionals, but their movements lacked the urgency they would have shown for a VIP. He was just another broken body on a Tuesday afternoon. Alara, having finished her punishment task, was instructed to clean the patient before he was moved to the pre-op staging area. It was another menial job, one nobody else wanted. She approached the gurney with a basin of warm water and a stack of sterile cloths. As the other nurses dispersed, she was left alone with the unconscious man. She began her work gently, her touch surprisingly steady. Wiping away the mud and blood was a task she had performed hundreds of times, but this time, something felt different. As she cleaned a deep gash on his forearm, her fingers brushed against something hard and metallic, embedded under the skin. It wasn't shrapnel. It was too smooth, too deliberate. She looked closer. It was a small, flat disc, no bigger than a dime. A tracker? Her training, buried under years of intentional neglect, began to stir. The quiet, timid nurse started to recede, and a different persona began to surface. She ignored the tracker for a moment and continued her assessment, her eyes now sharp and analytical. She wiped the grime from his neck and noticed a series of faint, almost invisible pinpricks, arranged in a specific geometric pattern. Not a rash, not an insect bite. It looked like the contact points of a taser, but a highly advanced, non-standard model. Then she smelled it. Faint, almost lost beneath the smell of blood and gasoline, was a bitter, almond-like scent. It was a smell she had been trained to recognize in her sleep. A smell that meant death. It was the signature of a cyanide-based compound, likely a fast-acting neurotoxin. Her eyes snapped to the monitor. His vitals were all wrong for a simple trauma victim. His heart rate was erratic, his blood pressure was crashing, but his oxygen saturation was strangely high. His body couldn't use the oxygen his lungs were taking in. Classic signs of cellular asphyxiation. The blunt force trauma from the car crash was a cover, a brutal, effective, but secondary event. The real killer was already in his bloodstream. A cold dread washed over her. Sterling had ordered an exploratory laparotomy. The standard anesthetics used for such a procedure, particularly the paralytics, would react with the neurotoxin. It wouldn't just kill him. It would cause a catastrophic cascade failure. His heart would explode. It would look like a complication from his injuries, a tragic but unavoidable outcome. The perfect murder. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. She had to tell Sterling. She had to make him listen. She dropped the cloth into the basin and ran from the bay, her earlier timidity forgotten, replaced by a desperate urgency. She found him schmoozing with the Davenport family outside Bay 1. He was smiling, his voice smooth and reassuring. He looked like a savior. Alara skidded to a halt a few feet away, breathing heavily. "Dr. Sterling," she said, her voice louder than she intended. He turned, his smile vanishing as he saw her. His eyes narrowed in fury. "Vance, what in God's name do you think you're doing? I am with a patient." "Sir, it's the John Doe in Bay 4, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You can't operate. Not yet." Sterling's face darkened. He took a step toward her, shielding his conversation from the Davenports. "Have you lost your mind?" he whispered furiously. "I gave you an order." "It's not just trauma, sir. I think he's been exposed to a chemical agent, a neurotoxin," she explained, the words tumbling out. "The smell, the pinpricks on his neck, his O2 sats, it's all wrong. Anesthesia will kill him." Sterling stared at her for a long moment, a look of utter disbelief on his face. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a short, barking, cruel sound. "A neurotoxin? You think you're in some kind of spy movie, Nurse Vance? You're a glorified janitor who can barely handle a bedpan, and now you're a forensic toxicologist?" He leaned in close again, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You are embarrassing me. You are embarrassing this hospital. I don't know what kind of pathetic delusion you're living in, but it ends now. Get back to that bay and administer the pre-op sedative as ordered." "That's a direct order. Do you understand me?" Alara looked into his eyes, and she saw more than just arrogance. She saw a complete, utter refusal to be wrong. He wouldn't even consider the possibility. Her diagnosis, her observation, was an insult to his ego, and his ego was all that mattered. The patient's life was irrelevant. "But sir, he'll die," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Then he'll die," Sterling said, his voice flat and cold. "Now get out of my sight before I have security throw you out." He turned his back on her, his smile instantly reappearing as he faced the Davenports once more. "So sorry about that. Staffing issues." Alara stood frozen for a second, the blood roaring in her ears. He had given her a choice, her job or a man's life, her quiet, hidden existence or the person she used to be, the person she had tried so hard to kill. The choice was no choice at all. In that moment, the timid, frightened Bambi died, and the angel took flight. She didn't run back to the bay. She walked. Her shuffle was gone, replaced by a stride that was long, purposeful, and silent. Her shoulders were back, her head was high. The anxiety in her eyes had been replaced by a glacial calm. She was no longer a nurse in a civilian hospital. She was a flight medic on a hot LZ, and she had a soldier to save. She entered Bay 4 and immediately hit the lock button on the door's electronic keypad. A soft click echoed in the small room. She had maybe 5 minutes. She ignored the pre-op sedative Sterling had ordered and went straight to the crash cart. Her hands moved with a speed and precision that would have stunned her colleagues. They were no longer the fumbling, clumsy hands of Alara Vance. They were the hands of a surgeon, a warrior, a lifesaver. Her mind was a whirlwind of calculations. Cyanide-based agent, cellular asphyxiation. She needed an antidote, a chelating agent. Standard hospital supply didn't carry military-grade antidotes, but she knew the civilian equivalent. Hydroxycobalamin. It was kept in the chemical spill emergency locker in the sub-basement pharmacy, rarely used, collecting dust. There was no time for that. She needed something now. She scanned the contents of the crash cart. Epinephrine, atropine, lidocaine, all useless. Then she saw it. A box of sodium thiosulfate. It was used in rare cases of cyanide poisoning from smoke inhalation. It was weaker than what she truly needed, but it would have to do. It would buy him time. She ripped open a sterile syringe, drew a precise 12.5-gram dose into a 50-milliliter saline bag, and primed an IV line. Her movements were fluid, economical, honed by thousands of hours of practice in the back of a bucking helicopter, in the dark, under fire. She expertly found a new vein in the man's arm, ignoring the ones the residents had already blown. The needle slid in perfectly on the first try. She opened the line, letting the life-saving fluid drip into his system. As she worked, she spoke to him, her voice low and calm, the way she had spoken to so many dying boys on dusty battlefields worlds away. "Hang on, soldier. Just hang on. I've got you. Help is coming." The door handle rattled. Then came a loud, insistent banging. "Vance, open this door! Open this door right now!" It was Sterling's voice, tight with rage. Alara ignored him. She watched the monitor. The man's heart rate was beginning to stabilize. The erratic spikes were smoothing out. His blood pressure ticked up a single, precious point. It was working. The banging stopped. She heard Sterling's muffled, furious voice. "Get security. Get a master key. If you have to, break it down. I want her out of there." Alara knew she had only seconds left. She scanned the man's body again, the tracker on his arm. It was her only hope. She looked for a power source, a way to activate it. Under the grime on his wrist, she saw a faint tattoo, almost invisible. A series of numbers. Not a code. A frequency. Her eyes widened. It was a frequency she recognized. A military emergency band, reserved for downed operatives. There was a loud crack as the door's lock gave way. It flew open, slamming against the wall. Dr. Sterling stood there, his face purple with rage. Behind him stood two burly security guards. "What have you done?" he screamed, striding into the room. He saw the IV line she had just placed, the empty sodium thiosulfate vial on the tray. His eyes went wide with a mixture of fury and, for the first time, a flicker of fear. She hadn't just disobeyed him. She had administered an unauthorized, potentially dangerous medication. "You're insane," he breathed. "You've assaulted this patient. You could have killed him." "I saved his life," Alara said, her voice steady and clear. It didn't sound like her own. It was the voice of command, the voice of certainty. The transformation was not lost on Sterling. The frightened little mouse was gone. In her place stood a woman he didn't recognize, her back ramrod straight, her eyes daring him. It only fueled his rage. "You're fired, Vance," he roared. "Effective immediately. You will never work in this city, in this state, ever again. I will see to it that your license is permanently revoked." He gestured to the guards. "Get her out of my hospital. Now. If she resists, have her arrested for trespassing." The two guards moved in. They were large men, used to dealing with delirious patients and angry family members. They grabbed Alara's arms. She didn't fight. She didn't struggle. She simply went limp, a silent, stony expression on her face. The battle was lost. She had done what she could. She had bought the soldier a little time. Now, it was over. As they dragged her from the bay, she saw Sterling rip the IV line she had placed from the patient's arm. "Get him prepped for surgery," he snarled at a terrified-looking Chloe. "And someone clean up this mess." The guards pulled her through the ER. Her colleagues stared, some with shock, some with pity, some with a smug sense of satisfaction. Brenda, the senior nurse, smirked openly. Alara didn't see them. Her gaze was distant, her mind already retreating back into the shell she had built for herself. It had been a mistake to come out. It had been a mistake to think she could make a difference. They were halfway across the main lobby, heading for the sliding glass doors that led to the rain-slicked street and the end of her career. Her feet dragged on the polished floor. Defeat was a cold, heavy blanket. Then the world outside the glass doors changed. A sudden, blinding white light flooded the lobby, followed by a deafening roar that vibrated through the floor and rattled the windows in their frames. Everyone froze. Outside, on the 6-lane highway that ran past the hospital, a Black Hawk helicopter was descending. Its rotors whipped the rain into a furious vortex, pushing cars aside as if they were toys. A second Black Hawk landed right behind it, its black fuselage gleaming like the carapace of a monstrous insect. Traffic screeched to a halt. Horns blared and then fell silent, replaced by the overwhelming thud, thud, thud of the rotor blades. The hospital's automatic doors slid open, and the chaos of the ER was replaced by a new kind of order. Cold, silent, and deadly. A team of men flowed into the lobby. They were dressed in black tactical gear, carrying short-barreled rifles held at a low ready. They moved with a predatory grace, their eyes scanning everything, their faces masked and impassive. They weren't police. They weren't SWAT. They were soldiers. Elite. The kind you don't see unless the world is ending. They fanned out, securing the lobby in seconds without saying a single word. The entire hospital fell into a stunned, terrified silence. Through the cordon of soldiers, a man walked in. He was tall and broad-shouldered, in his late 50s, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore the immaculate uniform of a United States Navy Admiral, his chest a rainbow of distinguished service ribbons. He moved with an aura of absolute, unquestionable authority. He ignored the terrified hospital staff, his steely gray eyes sweeping the room with an urgent, focused intensity. Dr. Sterling, his face pale with shock, took a hesitant step forward. I'm Dr. Sterling, the chief of this department. What is the meaning of this? The Admiral's gaze flicked to him, dismissed him, and continued scanning. An aide in a slightly less decorated uniform hurried to his side, holding a tablet. Sir, the assets locator beacon is active. It's faint, but it's inside this building. Triangulating now. The Admiral nodded curtly, his jaw tight. His eyes continued their relentless search. They passed over the nurses, the doctors, the security guards, and then they stopped. They locked onto the small, disheveled figure of Alara, still held firmly by the two guards. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. His relentless pace halted. The aide spoke again, his voice low. Sir, we're also tracking a secondary signal. A manual activation on a restricted frequency. It's an old SOAR distress call. The call sign, it's Angel. The Admiral's eyes never left Alara. He saw the worn-out scrubs, the tear streaks on her face, the rough hands of the guards on her arms. His expression hardened into something dangerous. He took a step toward them, his voice cutting through the stunned silence of the lobby like a blade. It wasn't a shout. It was far more terrifying than that. It was a command. Let her go. The two security guards froze, their hands still on Alara. They looked from the furious Admiral to their own boss, Dr. Sterling, for guidance. Sterling was gaping, his mind unable to process what was happening. The Admiral took another step. I said, he repeated, his voice dropping to an icy growl, let her go. Now. This time, there was no hesitation. The guards released Alara as if she were on fire, taking a hasty step back. The soldiers in the lobby shifted their positions slightly, their posture becoming more alert. Alara stumbled forward, rubbing her arms where the guards' fingers had dug in. She looked up at the towering Admiral, her mind a swirl of confusion and a dawning, impossible hope. The Admiral strode directly to her, his polished shoes stopping inches from her worn-out sneakers. He looked down at her, his stern expression softening almost imperceptibly. Nurse Vance? He asked, his voice now surprisingly gentle. Alara Vance? She could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. I'm Admiral Marcus Thorne, he said. He glanced at the rows of ribbons on his chest, then back at her. You served with the 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Flight nurse. Your call sign was Angel. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. The secret she had guarded for 5 years, the identity she had tried to erase, was laid bare in the middle of the hospital lobby. Tears welled in her eyes as she gave another small, shaky nod. A look of profound relief washed over the Admiral's face. Thank God, he breathed. He gestured back towards the ER. There's a man in there, a John Doe from a car accident. I know, Alara whispered, finding her voice. They're taking him to surgery. They can't. It will kill him. The Admiral's jaw tightened. The John Doe is Captain Alex Thorne of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. He is my son. He looked her directly in the eye, the full weight of his rank and his desperation bearing down on her. I received your signal. The report said you identified a chemical agent. Is that true? Yes, sir, she said, her voice growing stronger, clearer. The nurse was gone. The soldier was reporting for duty. A VX series derivative, I believe. I administered a partial countermeasure, sodium thiosulfate, to slow cellular asphyxiation. But the Chief of Staff ordered me removed and is proceeding with surgery. Admiral Thorne's face became a mask of cold fury. He turned, his eyes locking onto Dr. Sterling, who now looked like he was about to be physically ill. You, the Admiral bit out. He started walking back towards the ER, with Alara falling into step beside him. The team of soldiers formed a protective diamond around them, moving as one. "This is my hospital," Sterling stammered as they approached, trying to puff himself up with the last dregs of his authority. "You can't just—" "This hospital, Doctor, is now a temporary military command post under the authority of the United States Department of Defense," the Admiral stated, not even breaking stride. "Your authority here is terminated. You have two options. You can either offer your full and unconditional cooperation, or these men will place you under arrest for obstructing a national security operation." They reached Trauma Bay 4. Chloe was nervously trying to prep a new IV line. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Stand aside, nurse," the Admiral ordered gently. Chloe scrambled out of the way. Admiral Thorne stood over the gurney, his iron composure cracking for a moment as he looked at his son's battered face. A soldier with a handheld scanner stepped forward. He ran the device over Captain Thorne's body. "Sir, neurotoxin levels are elevated, but falling," the soldier reported. "Heart rate and blood pressure are stabilizing. Whatever she gave him, it's working. She saved him, sir." Admiral Thorne closed his eyes for a second, a silent prayer of thanks. Then he opened them, and they were filled with ice. He turned to face Dr. Sterling, who had followed them, his face the color of ash. "You were going to operate on him," the Admiral said, his voice dangerously quiet. I was following standard procedure for a trauma victim," Sterling sputtered. "She's a junior nurse. She's unstable. She administered an unauthorized drug." "She is Flight Nurse Alara Vance," the Admiral corrected him, his voice rising with each word. "She has more hours of combat medical experience than your entire staff combined. She holds the Distinguished Service Cross for performing field surgery on 3 soldiers, including my son, after her helicopter was shot down in enemy territory. She did it in the dark, under fire, with half her supplies destroyed. The unstable nurse you just fired and tried to have arrested is a decorated national hero." A collective gasp went through the crowd of hospital staff that had gathered at a safe distance. Chloe stared at Alara with awe. Brenda's smug smirk had been replaced by a look of slack-jawed horror. The Admiral pointed a finger at Sterling. "Her diagnosis was correct. Your diagnosis, based on arrogance and laziness, would have murdered him. As of this moment, Nurse Vance is in complete command of Captain Thorne's medical care. You and your staff will provide her with anything she asks for, instantly and without question. Am I clear?" Sterling could only nod, his body trembling. His world, his kingdom, had crumbled to dust around him in less than 10 minutes. The Admiral turned back to Alara. The fury was gone, replaced by a focused calm. "Angel, what do you need?" The name, her old name, jolted her back to life. The years of hiding fell away like a snake shedding its skin. "I need a secure room, military-grade cyanokit, hydroxycobalamin, at least 50 grams. Full-spectrum antibiotic and antiviral panels. And I need a direct line to the USA MRIID toxicology database. He was exposed to VX7. We need to know what we're really dealing with." The Admiral nodded to his aide. "You heard her. Make it happen. Now." He looked back at Alara, a flicker of a smile touching his lips. "Welcome back, nurse." In a secured conference room on the hospital's top floor, guarded by 2 of the silent soldiers, the true gravity of the situation became clear. Admiral Thorne paced the floor while Alara monitored his son's vitals on a portable military-grade monitor they had brought in. Alex Thorne, now stable and sleeping under the effect of the correct antidote, lay on a gurney. "Captain Thorne was on a clandestine mission," the Admiral explained, his voice low. "He was part of a team tasked with infiltrating a private research firm called OmniGen. We have intelligence that they've been weaponizing civilian research. Specifically, they developed an advanced neurotoxin, VX7. It's designed to mimic the symptoms of a physical trauma, making it virtually undetectable in a standard autopsy." Alara looked up from the monitor. "So the car crash wasn't an accident?" "No," the Admiral confirmed. "His team was ambushed. Alex was the only one who got out. He managed to secure a sample of the toxin and escape, but he was exposed in the process. He injected himself with a tracking beacon and a rudimentary coagulant just before they ran him off the road. The beacon is what led us here. Your distress call on the SOAR frequency confirmed our worst fears." "Who is OmniGen working for?" Alara asked. "We don't know," the Admiral admitted, a note of frustration in his voice. "They're a ghost. a shell corporation with ties to a private military company, the same PMC that ambushed my son's team. They're ruthless, and they're well-funded. They will not stop until they have that sample back, and any witnesses are eliminated. A thought, cold and sharp, pierced through Alara's mind. Sterling. His arrogance, his refusal to listen, his insistence on a procedure that would have been fatal. It was too perfect. "Admiral," she said slowly. "Dr. Sterling. It wasn't just ego. He was too insistent. He wanted my son dead." The Admiral stopped pacing and looked at her. "My intelligence officer is already running a background check on him. We've been monitoring his communications since we arrived." As he spoke, his aide entered the room and handed him a tablet without a word. The Admiral's eyes scanned the screen. His face, already grim, hardened into a mask of pure rage. "You were right," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He turned the tablet so Alara could see. It displayed financial records, a series of large, untraceable deposits into an offshore account belonging to Alistair Sterling. The source of the funds was a holding company known to be a front for the same PMC that had attacked Alex's team. The last deposit had been made 2 hours ago. "He wasn't just incompetent," the Admiral seethed. "He was their inside man. He was paid to make sure Alex died on his operating table." The realization sent a chill down Alara's spine. This hospital wasn't safe. Sterling knew they were here. He knew Alex was alive. He would report it to his handlers. "Sir, we have to move him," Alara said, her voice urgent. "They won't risk a direct assault on your men. Not yet. They'll try something quieter. They'll send one person." As if on cue, a faint beep emanated from the aide's tablet. He looked down, his eyes widening. "Sir, perimeter breach. An unauthorized individual just used a stolen key card to access this floor via the service elevator. He's disguised as a maintenance worker." The soldiers outside the door immediately raised their rifles, their stances shifting. Alara's eyes darted around the room. There was only one door. Alex was a stationary target. "He's not coming for a fight," Alara said, her mind racing. "He's coming for an injection." The door handle began to turn slowly. The soldiers braced. But Alara was looking at the ventilation grate on the wall. She remembered the hospital blueprints from her orientation. The service corridor ran behind that wall. "He's not at the door!" she yelled. "The wall!" At that exact moment, the ventilation grate was kicked inward with a muffled thud. A man in a grimy maintenance uniform rolled into the room. He wasn't carrying a gun. In his hand was a syringe filled with a clear liquid. He moved with a terrifying fluid grace, his eyes locked on Alex Thorne. He was an operative, a professional. The soldiers swung their rifles around, but the assassin was too fast, too close. He lunged for Alex's IV line, intending to inject the poison directly into his bloodstream. Alara didn't hesitate. She didn't think. She acted. Her body moved on pure instinct, honed by years of combat training. She grabbed the heavy stainless steel medical tray from a nearby table, the one holding fresh bandages and sterile instruments. In one fluid motion, she swung it like a discus, a move designed to disable, not to kill. The edge of the steel tray connected with the assassin's wrist with a sickening crack. The syringe flew from his grasp, shattering against the far wall. The man let out a strangled cry of pain and surprise, his arm hanging limp. He spun, his other hand reaching for a knife concealed at his belt, but Alara was already on him. She drove her shoulder into his chest, using his momentum against him. They crashed into the conference table. She didn't try to wrestle him. She used precision, a sharp, focused strike with the heel of her hand to his jaw, snapping his head back. A second strike to the side of his knee, buckling his leg. As he stumbled, she hooked her foot behind his, completing the takedown. He went down hard, his head hitting the floor with a hollow thud that knocked him unconscious. It was over in less than 5 seconds. The room was silent, save for the heavy breathing of the two soldiers, who now had their rifles trained on the unconscious man on the floor. The Admiral and his aides stared, utterly stunned. They had just witnessed the mousy, quiet nurse they had found being bullied in the lobby transform into a lethal weapon. She stood over the downed assassin, her chest rising and falling, her eyes blazing with a cold fire they hadn't seen before. Alara took a deep, shuddering breath, the adrenaline beginning to recede. She looked at her own hands, half expecting to see them covered in the dust and blood of a battlefield far away. The Admiral finally found his voice. My God, Vance, he said, a note of pure awe in his tone. Sir, his aide interrupted, his voice tense. The assassin had an open comms link. They know he failed. They know the asset is secure. And they know we've made Sterling, the Admiral finished, his mind already jumping ahead. This hospital is compromised. They'll escalate. He looked at Alara, his decision made. We're leaving. Now. We need to get him off the grid, somewhere they can't find him. He turned to his aide. Prep the extraction protocol. Route Omega. Get the chopper ready for a rooftop evac. And get a team to Sterling's office. I want him in custody before he can disappear. He looked back at Alara, his expression a mixture of respect and concern. Angel, can he be moved? Alara was already checking her son's vitals. They were stable. He's strong, sir, she said, a hint of a smile touching her lips. He's a soldier. He's ready. The escape from North Haven General was a blur of controlled chaos. The Admiral's soldiers moved with terrifying efficiency, clearing a path to the roof. One team broke off, storming Dr. Sterling's office. They found him frantically shredding documents, a packed bag on his desk. His attempt to flee was pathetic and short-lived. He was cuffed and gagged before he could utter a single protest. On the roof, the rain had subsided to a miserable drizzle. The Black Hawk helicopter waited, its rotors spinning slowly, a dark promise of safety. Alara and the soldiers carefully loaded Captain Thorne, still strapped to the gurney, into the main cabin. The Admiral climbed in after them, and Alara took her place by Alex's side, her hand resting on his arm, her eyes scanning the monitors. The helicopter lifted off, the city lights shrinking below them. They flew for over an hour, heading north, away from the city, away from civilization. They landed in a small clearing deep within a dense national forest. Waiting for them was a black, armored SUV. The transfer was quick and silent. They drove for another 30 minutes down a series of unmarked dirt roads until they arrived at a large, rustic cabin. It looked like a simple hunting lodge, but Alara knew better. The reinforced doors, the Kevlar-lined shutters on the windows, and the subtle glint of security cameras hidden in the pine trees told a different story. This was a safe house. Inside, the cabin was Spartan but functional. A large main room with a fireplace, a small but well-equipped medical area, and several bedrooms. The Admiral's men immediately began setting up a defensive perimeter, their movements practiced and sure. This was one of my old team's hideouts, the Admiral explained, seeing Alara's analytical gaze. Completely off the grid. Solar power, satellite comms, its own well. We'll be safe here for a while. For the next few hours, Alara worked tirelessly. She administered the full course of the antidote, treated Alex's other injuries, and kept a constant watch over him. The Admiral coordinated with his command, trying to unravel the conspiracy that was Omnigen. Slowly, Alex began to stir. His eyelids fluttered open. His gaze was hazy at first, then it focused on Alara's face. "Angel?" he rasped, his voice rough. He recognized her, not from the hospital, but from 5 years ago, from the dust and the fire. Alara's breath caught. A genuine smile, the first in years, touched her lips. "Hey there, Captain," she said softly. "Welcome back." "Knew you'd pull me through," he mumbled, a faint smile on his own face, before he drifted back to sleep. The quiet didn't last. Just after dawn, one of the soldiers on watch gave a sharp, 2-word report over the radio. "Contact. Multiple hostiles." Sterling had talked, or Omnigen's tracking was better than they thought. It didn't matter. They had been found. The Admiral's face was grim. How many? At least 12, approaching from the north and west, full tactical gear. They're professionals. The cabin, which had felt like a fortress moments before, suddenly felt like a trap. There were only 6 of them, including the Admiral and Alara. Alex was in no condition to fight. "Barricade the doors and windows," the Admiral commanded, grabbing a rifle from the weapons case. "Alara, stay with my son. Keep him safe." "Yes, sir," she said, but her eyes were on the medical supplies. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a combatant. The first shots rang out, the sharp crack of suppressed rifle fire answered by the heavier bark of the soldiers' weapons. The windows shattered, despite the shutters, as high-caliber rounds tore through the wood. The firefight was immediate and brutal. The PMC mercenaries were aggressive, advancing steadily under covering fire. Alara pushed Alex's gurney into the most secure room, a small bedroom with only one window. She barricaded the door with a heavy wooden dresser. She could hear the shouts of the soldiers, the constant exchange of gunfire. One of the Admiral's men cried out in pain. They were outnumbered, and the enemy was closing in. She checked on Alex. He was awake, his eyes clear and alert, filled with the frustration of a warrior unable to join the fight. "How bad is it?" he asked. "They're good," Alara said honestly, her ears tuned to the sounds of the battle. "And there are a lot of them." A loud explosion rocked the cabin as the mercenaries breached the front door. The gunfire became more intense, closer. Alara's heart pounded. She looked around the room, her mind in tactical mode. One window, one door. A defensible position, but only for so long. Suddenly, the firing from the main room tapered off. She heard a new sound. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming down the hall. Not the heavy tread of the Admiral's men. Lighter, more stealthy. They were inside. The doorknob to the bedroom began to turn. The barricade held. There was a pause, then two heavy thuds as a mercenary slammed his shoulder against the door. The wood splintered. Alex struggled to sit up. "My sidearm," he gasped, gesturing to the gear they had stripped off him. "It's in the bag." Alara saw the bag, but there was no time. The door shuddered again, the frame cracking. She looked at Alex, then at the window. Escape was not an option. There was only one way this ended. Just then, a wounded soldier stumbled into the room through an adjoining bathroom she hadn't realized was there. He was clutching his side, his face pale. They're all down," he gasped, before collapsing. His sidearm clattered from his holster and slid across the wooden floor, stopping right at Alara's feet. The main door to the bedroom burst open. A mercenary in full black gear stood there, his rifle raised. He saw Alex on the gurney, and a triumphant, cruel smile spread across his face under his helmet. He leveled his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger. He never saw Alara. She had moved into the shadows the moment the door broke. As he focused on Alex, she bent down, her hand closing around the cool, familiar weight of the pistol. She rose in one fluid motion. She didn't aim with her eyes. She aimed with her body, pointing and shooting as she had been trained to do 1,000 times. 2 shots. Crack, crack. The sound was deafening in the small room. 2 red blossoms appeared on the mercenary's chest, perfectly centered. His eyes went wide with shock. The rifle fell from his hands. He took a staggering step back and collapsed in the doorway, dead before he hit the ground. Silence. Alara stood there, the pistol held steady in a 2-handed grip, smoke curling from the barrel. Her breath was even. Her hands were rock steady. Alex stared at her, not with surprise, but with a look of profound respect. The silence was broken by the sound of approaching helicopters. Louder this time. More of them. Reinforcements. The Admiral must have gotten a call out. The siege was over. The next morning, Dr. Alastair Sterling stood before a podium in the main lobby of North Haven General. He had been released from military custody and told to control the narrative. He looked haggard, but defiant. Cameras flashed as he leaned into the microphone. "Yesterday," he began, his voice ringing with false sincerity, "this hospital was the scene of a deeply disturbing incident involving a now discharged nurse, Alara Vance. This unstable individual, suffering from severe delusions, assaulted a patient and had to be forcibly removed. The subsequent events, which have been mischaracterized as a military action, were in fact related to a gang dispute involving the patient she attacked. We are cooperating fully with law enforcement to—" He never got to finish the sentence. The main doors of the hospital slid open. Every head in the room turned. Admiral Marcus Thorne strode in, flanked by a phalanx of uniformed military police. Beside him, pushing a wheelchair, was Alara Vance. She was no longer in scrubs. She wore the crisp, formal dress uniform of a United States Navy lieutenant. On her chest was a single, gleaming medal, the Distinguished Service Cross. In the wheelchair sat Captain Alex Thorne. He was pale, and his arm was in a sling, but he was sitting ramrod straight in his own decorated Army uniform. His eyes were fixed on Sterling, with an expression of cold contempt. They moved through the stunned crowd of reporters, who parted before them like the Red Sea. Sterling stared, his jaw hanging open, his carefully constructed lies turning to ash in his mouth. Admiral Thorne stepped up to the podium, gently moving Sterling aside. He didn't even look at him. He tapped the microphone. "My name is Admiral Marcus Thorne," he said, his voice booming through the lobby. "And I am here to set the record straight." He gestured to Sterling. "This man, Dr. Alistair Sterling, is not a hero. He is a traitor and a would-be murderer." A wave of gasps and murmurs swept through the press corps. Sterling started to protest. "This is an outrage! Slander!" "Is it?" the Admiral countered, his voice dripping with ice. He nodded to his aide, who connected a device to the PA system. A recording played. It was Sterling's voice, frantic and panicked, speaking to the PMC commander. "The plan failed. She knew. The nurse, she knew. The Admiral has him now. No, I don't know how. You have to fix this. Get your people to the safe house. The coordinates are..." The recording ended. The silence in the lobby was absolute. Sterling's face was a mask of pure terror. He looked like a cornered animal. "It's fake!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "It's a fabrication. They're framing me!" As he screamed, 2 federal agents in dark suits moved through the crowd. They reached the podium and each took one of Sterling's arms. "Alistair Sterling," one of the agents said calmly, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and treason against the United States of America." Sterling's legs gave out. He collapsed, sobbing, as they pulled his hands behind his back and cuffed him. "No! I'm a doctor! I'm the chief! You can't do this!" he wailed as they dragged him away, his expensive shoes scraping pathetically against the floor he once commanded. His sycophantic nurses, including Brenda, stared in horror, trying to distance themselves from the man they had so eagerly served. Chloe, however, stood near the back, tears of vindication streaming down her face. The Admiral watched him go, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to the microphone. His gaze fell on Alara, and his face softened. "The real hero in this story," he said, his voice resonating with pride, "is this woman, Lieutenant Alara Vance, United States Navy. Yesterday, acting alone, she correctly identified a sophisticated chemical weapon, defied an order that would have led to a man's death, and saved the life of a decorated American soldier. Later, she defended him from an armed assassin and fought alongside my men to protect him from a dozen more." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Her medical license, which Dr. Sterling maliciously sought to revoke, has been fully reinstated with a formal commendation from the governor. Her name is cleared. Her honor is absolute." He looked out at the sea of stunned faces. "Let this be a lesson. True strength is not found in titles or authority. It's found in character, in doing the right thing, no matter the cost." The lobby erupted in a thunderous wave of applause. Later, in the quiet of the Admiral's temporary office, the 3 of them stood together. "Omnigen is being dismantled as we speak," the Admiral said. "The PMC is being hunted down. You've cut the head off a very dangerous snake, both of you." He then turned to Alara. "Lieutenant, your actions have brought to light a critical gap in our special operations capabilities. We need a new unit. A small, elite, rapid deployment team of medical professionals who are also trained operators. A team that can go into the worst places on Earth and bring our people home. It needs a commander. Someone with your unique combination of skills, courage, and integrity." He paused. "The position is yours, if you want it. It's time to stop hiding, Angel. It's time to come home." Alara looked from the Admiral to Alex. He gave her a small, encouraging nod. The fear, the anxiety, the desire to be invisible, it was all gone. She had found her purpose again, not by running from her past, but by embracing it. "I accept, sir," she said, her voice clear and strong. The final walk out of North Haven General was different. Alara carried no shame, no fear. She walked with her head held high, her new uniform a symbol of her rebirth. She passed the nurses' station, where her former colleagues watched in silent awe. She gave a small, warm smile to Chloe, a silent thank you that was returned with a tearful nod. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. A black government SUV was waiting at the curb. Alex Thorne stood beside it, out of the wheelchair now, leaning on a cane but standing tall. As Alara approached, he straightened up, his movements stiff but precise, and rendered a sharp salute. "Ma'am," he said, a respectful grin on his face. "Glad to be serving with you." Alara smiled, a real, brilliant smile that reached her eyes and made her glow. She returned the salute crisply. The faint scar on her temple was no longer a mark of trauma she had to hide. It was a badge of honor, a reminder of every life she had fought for, every battle she had won. It was a part of who she was, and for the first time in a very long time, she was proud of that person. She got into the car. Alex followed, settling in beside her. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, leaving the hospital, the bad memories, and her old life behind. They drove toward the horizon, toward a new mission, a new purpose, together. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. The story teaches us that true strength and courage are not about the title you hold or the power you wield, but about your character and your willingness to do the right thing, even when it's hard. It shows that you should never judge a book by its cover, as people who seem quiet or meek can possess incredible inner strength and hidden talents. Doing the right thing, like Alara did, always pays off in the end, leading to vindication and respect. What would you have done if you were in Alara's shoes? Would you have followed the doctor's orders to save your job, or would you have risked it all to save a patient's life? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Have a nice rest of your day.